Well, thank you. Thank you, folks. Welcome, welcome. We're going to jump in. First, a few housekeeping items. Michael, the next slide, please. So you're in the right place. You're at Voices of the Wetlands, and we're going to hear some great stories and really exciting. So I'm going to breeze through our first intros really quickly. Please say hello in the chat. Feel free to share your name, location, and organization if you're with one and something you love about the Mississippi River. And this is a meeting is in meeting format, so please remember to mute yourself. Otherwise, we'll interrupt the speakers accidentally. If you have questions for the speakers, please use the chat as we go. We'll be following those. And at the Q&A, you could raise your hand if you'd like to have your voice heard. Otherwise, we'll ask those questions at the end of the presentations. We are recording today, and those will be shared in an email link and follow up with you if you registered. We'll also post it on our YouTube so you can share it with your friends and family. My name is Marie Risalvato, the policy manager here at One Mississippi, and I'm really excited to be able to be spending this River Days of Action event with you. Next slide, please. Want to do a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, the Autobahn. Next slide, please. And I want to celebrate and recognize each and every one of you. Thank you for being part of River Days of Action today and all of last week and this coming week and years past and future. It's been a joy. From Minnesota to Louisiana, we're gathering to celebrate the mighty Mississippi. And we've surpassed our goals of 40 events. I think it's 45, which is a record, and you're part of that. And we're going to put in the chat another link to find more events. And we hope you'll join us throughout the rest of the week as well. We feature events at River Days across the Mississippi River, and there's a map and a calendar. Most are free, and all are rooted in care for the river, land, water, people, and wildlife. And we'll put the map and some ways that you can join us on social. Next slide, please, Michael. Now, this year has been absolutely unbelievable. Talk about record setting. Last year was the first ever National Mississippi River Day, and we were blown away when we secured 15 proclamations. You all did that in its inaugural year. This year, we have reached, drum roll, please. And next slide, please, Michael. 29 cities, states, counties, and our first ever tribal government. And it has been a truly a day uniting the nation around clean water, collective impact, and the people, land, and water and wildlife for our beloved Mississippi River. We're going to put those in the chat. You'll have a list of this. We'll send it out via our newsletter so you can see, and we hope you'll join us. Because proclamations from governments are powerful, and so is the voice of the people. So this year we have a place where you can add your own name. Many of you have already to the growing National Mississippi River Day effort. Please sign and share this link widely with your networks, your members, and your community. Every name matters, and it cultivates a community we can further engage year after year. So thanks for being part. All right, next slide. Just move quickly along. Just a little bit about One Mississippi. If you're new here, we believe that everyone deserves access to clean, safe water, and that starts with protecting the rivers, wetlands, and streams that sustain our communities. Wetlands, as you may know, are vital ecosystems that filter out water, shelter wildlife, and protect communities from floods. And yet they remain one of the most threatened landscapes along the Mississippi River and across our country. Stronger protections for rivers and wetlands are urgently needed to address the increasing frequency of droughts, floods, and pollutions. And so that's why I and the team is so grateful today to bring this amazing group of leaders to share their conservation stories, how they're taking action, and what's happening right now, and how you can get involved. So just thank you so much for being part of One Mississippi. And then to move quickly, we wanted to just share the bios in the chat mostly, but I'll just share really quickly. Thank you to Jessica Mohlman, who's the director of the Environmental Education and Wildlife Ecologist at the National Great Rivers Research and Education Center in East Alton, Illinois. Victoria Bradford Styrbicki is an artist, cultural producer, and executive and artistic director at the House Unbuilt. And Codi Sharkey is a conservation programs manager at the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium in Dubuque, Iowa. Let's give them a round of emoticons, chats, thank yous, good energy for sharing their time, expertise, and leadership with us. And so I will pass it over to Jessica. And as we're pulling up Jessica's slides, just want to remind you, put your questions in the Q&A chat. And at the end, if you raise your hand, we'll call on you or we'll read out your questions, but we'll be taking questions after our three presenters go. All right, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Marie, and for One Mississippi hosting myself and our other speakers today, and for everybody joining in on our call today. As Marie mentioned, my name is Jessica Mohlman, and I'm the Director of Environmental Education and a wildlife ecologist at National Great Rivers Research and Education Center in East Alton, Illinois. We are very grateful and thankful to have the Mississippi River just right outside our windows right here today. And we're going to start off our webinar today with Voices of the Night, Discovering Wetland Health Through Frog Calls. We can continue on. So when night falls, wetlands come alive with croaks and trills, but these sounds tell a story. And this morning or this afternoon, we're going to start by learning how to listen for these voices and what they reveal about the health of our wetlands. And click. And before we get started, I want us to take a moment to think. When we first think of the word wetland, what image or feeling do we associate with that word? And I want us to think to ourselves about that. What do you think about? Do you think about water, birds, frogs, plants, or something else? And I want you to hold on to that thought, and we can continue on. You can click forward. Do we imagine someplace like this? Perhaps someplace like our next image? Or perhaps someplace like our next image? But often, many people do not imagine places like this because wetlands are often misunderstood. And there's a lot of misconceptions that follow wetlands, like they are thought of as being muddy, buggy, or smelly places, or places that are full of mosquitoes or hard to navigate. We can click through those photos there. And honestly, sometimes they are, but wetlands are also indispensable. They are the kidneys of our landscapes. They're filtering our water, buffering our floods, storing carbon, and supporting some of the world's most diverse communities. But before we dive into kind of breaking those misconceptions, let's first kind of go back and think about what even is a wetland? And in its simplest term, it's in its name. It is a wet land. It is a place that is covered either seasonally or permanently by water. I think you can click through those next portions. But what is it that makes a wetland unique, besides the fact that it is wet land? There are three common elements that can make up most definitions that we see, and that is the hydrology, the soil, the sediment, and the biota, or the plants and animals that call these places home. And these elements are work together to create healthy, thriving environments. And wetlands come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, whether that be marshes, swamps, floodplain forests, or vernal pools, and each of those play unique roles on our landscapes. You can click forward. And wetlands are important, but why are they important? Beyond the fact that we just want to protect all sorts of habitats. Well, they're thought of as Earth's kidneys. They filter out pollutants from our water systems. They're also nature's sponges. I could have very much used them on my way to work today of our torrential downpours we were having that were flooding our roads. So they naturally help soak up those flood events that we have. And we're seeing more and more of those large flood events because we do not have nature's sponges, especially in our very urbanized areas. And they're some of the world's most diverse ecosystems that we have. They also provide numerous other goods and services that are far too long for us to go through in this webinar today in the time that I have. And there are many threats that are facing wetlands. Some of them stem from the misconceptions that were about them, with the biggest one being wetland loss, but also many of these do not lie within just a silo and are connected to each other, with one of the main drivers being climate change. And wetlands cannot speak for themselves. But frogs are one of nature's natural storytellers. Let's click to the next slide. They could tell us who's breeding, who's stressed, who's missing, and how a wetland is changing. And when frogs speak up or fall silent, they're giving us real-time snapshot of ecosystem health. They are frogs. They are the vital signs of our wetlands. They are bioindicators. They are sensitive to pollution, habitat loss, and climate change. And they depend on both land and water for their life cycles, which is really great for wetlands, which are the connectors of both of those systems. But what is a bioindicator? A bioindicator is a species or a group of species that gives us clues about the health of an ecosystem simply by being present or absent or behaving in a certain way. In other words, they're nature's early warning systems. And these species can react quickly to environmental changes like pollution, habitat loss, or water quality shifts, or climate stress, often before we see these visible signs in the environment. And frogs are just one example of bioindicators. Because frogs have their amazing semi-permeable skin that's designed to transfer water and oxygen through it, they can also easily absorb pollutants or chemicals that might be in their environments as well. Frogs are so sensitive that they can be thought of as a canary in a coal mine or an early warning of danger. It can be thought of as a red flag if a wetland does not have frogs present, especially if that habitat used to. This is also exemplified by the fact that water is part of their life cycle. Their eggs are laid in water, their tadpoles in water, their froglets, as we like to call them, rely on water. Then their adults going back to water, laying their eggs again. So if there's any sort of pollutants or toxins in that water, their special skin mixed with their life cycle is just exemplified by interacting with that habitat. Let's click forward. So there are a lot of threats facing amphibians such as frogs. Habitat loss, climate change, disease, invasive species, and exploitation, but habitat loss being that major factor. But again, none of these exist within a silo. Let's click forward. Well, and over 40% of all amphibians are threatened with extinction. 90% of Illinois' original wetland area has been lost due to habitat degradation or alteration by humans. And over 45% of U.S. endangered species are wetland-dependent plants and animals. However, it's important to know that there are people working to understand these voices. People like individuals at National Great Rivers Research and Education Center, where I work, as well as working on the projects with our Wetlands Collaborative. And not only are we as researchers working on this, but we're also inviting people to help understand these voices as well. And we're working through doing that through FrogWatch, which is a community science program that is a national program broken down into chapters throughout the United States. So FrogWatch USA is a national community science program that engages volunteers in identifying frogs and toads by their calls and reporting observations through their breeding season. And these observations can help us in a number of ways. You can click forward. through tracking their species presence and activity, supporting local and regional national amphibian research, and increasing public understanding of wetland ecosystem health. And FrogWatch USA has been around for quite some time. It's been around since 1998. It's currently housed at Akron Zoo in Ohio, but used to be with AZA. And there's over 38 states with active chapters right now, as well as FrogWatch Canada, and over 130 active chapters in the United States, including FrogWatch St. Louis chapter, which is our gateway chapter in this area. And we're able to address questions such as how diverse are the local population of frogs and toads? How are there rare and invasive species in the area? And are there long-term shifts in species range, diversity, and seasonal timing? And we're inviting the public to join the chorus and help understand what's happening here. So we began this section of the webinar by the idea that wetlands have voices and that frogs are some of the clearest storytellers. Through FrogWatch, we're inviting volunteers to join that chorus and adding their observations to a bigger story. And through NGREC's research, we are working to understand that what those voices mean to the health and future of our wetlands. But a single frog is just a moment, and a handful of calls is just a sound. And it's only when many people listen across seasons, wetlands, and communities that those moments can truly turn a story into something we can learn from. When education, community science, and research come together, the quiet nighttime chorus becomes a very powerful tool for conservation. The wetlands are speaking, and the more listeners we have, the stronger and clearer the story becomes. And I really invite you to become one to go join us in the chorus and to thank you. And I thank you for listening. And now I'm going to turn it over to something that the frogs can help us learn from, and to turn it over to Victoria. Forgive me for my tongue ties at the end.
Well, hello. I'm Victoria Bradford Styrbicki, Executive and Artistic Director of a house Unbuilt, as Marie previously said. So we do work up and down the Mississippi River from headwaters to Gulf, gathering stories and creating cultural products through that work, through field research, trying to use the arts to create awe, to create activation around the issues and concerns that are happening in our waterways. In 2024 and 2025, I did a project along the Gulf Coast trying to explore the history of extractive industries in those waters and how they have influenced the communities and the coast and the water of the Mississippi River and the Gulf and the other waterways there over time. And as part of that project, I got to go out with some folks from Audubon Delta on a bird survey in the evening. Next slide. We entered the marsh late in the evening as the sun set. And this is a specific kind of wetland. As Jessica was talking about, there are various kinds of wetlands. This is the high marsh. And in the background, you can kind of hear us talking and moving through the grasses. It's a very dense grass. And we were looking for a very specific kind of bird called a black rail. This bird is a threatened species found along the Gulf Coast between Texas and Louisiana. And through meeting Dr. Eric Johnson, who was then with Audubon and now is with the LSU Ag Center, I got to learn a little bit about this species called the ghost bird. It's very elusive. It rarely flies, it rarely vocalizes, and it really moves silently through the dense grass. And so our goal was to look for anything that was darting out. It could have been a mouse, it could have been a bird, it could have been anything, and to say bird as we saw it and run toward it with our nets and clamp down into the grass. And then everybody shuttled over there with the lights on our heads and looked at what it might be. And luckily, once we saw it was a bird, and unfortunately, it wasn't a black rail, it was a clapper rail. But this was exciting enough, and we got to measure its wings, blow on it to see, what's the fatty tissue look like, put an ID band on it, a unique ID band that would help them track it if they found it again out as they were surveying. And I got to hold it in my hands, which was just an incredible experience, and set it down to release it. This experience, as I waded through in my red hunter boots, not made for the marsh, let me tell you, soaking wet and cold. This was a very cold November night. Just really got me intensely connected with a place in Cameron Parish that, I didn't spend a lot of time in my childhood growing up in Louisiana, but a new appreciation for a wetland that was so interconnected to the people there, and some of the people that I'm going to share their stories with you as we go forward. Next slide.
We're seeing lots of bird populations declining. Black rail is one example of a bird that if we don't act, it will disappear. And that is a bird that tells us that our coastal ridges are under threat. They're what we call a ghost bird. They're a bird that's extremely hard to detect. They're in this class of birds that we like to call secretive marsh birds, which is just a wonderful term. And this is a bird that for 10 months of the year is almost completely silent. It's as big as a sparrow, and it lives entirely under grass that is knee-high. And so one, it's just really hard to find, and two, it seems to be a habitat specialist. It is only found in what we call high marsh. So if it gets too wet, they don't like to get their feet wet, their nests flood out. And if it gets too shrubby, they don't like to live in that either. So there's this sweet spot between the low wet marsh, which we have still lots of in South Louisiana, and the Cheniere ridges, which we still have some of, only maybe 10% of it left. But this sort of high marsh area has been colonized and developed for human homes, for development, for business, for cattle ranching. It was sort of the easiest place for us to build over the last 200 years, right? And so there's very little of that left, and it's under the threat of sea level rise. And so with the rate of sea level rise that we're seeing, this high marsh is basically getting inundated, becoming low wet marsh, and the Chenieres above it will die off and turn into ghost forests without any tree, without any leaves. But it takes decades for that ghost forest to sort of collapse and become marsh. And by the time sea level rise gets there, it will already be too high for a black rail habitat. And so if we do nothing to protect this bird, it will be extinct by 2068.
So that was Dr. Eric Johnson again, and I got to spend a lot of time talking with him and picking his brain, learning about this bird and learning about the importance of birds. They also are that, literal canary in the coal mine, a bioindicator of things that are happening in the Louisiana marsh and in the wetlands, what's happening along the coast, and what's happening with climate change. And listening is truly this ecological practice that I have embraced in my artwork and in my organization. And I think that as we start to understand what's going on in these communities, we need to build in this listening practice. It's not just about the data. It's not just about all of the scientific indicators. It's also about being in community with these people and listening to them, listening to their voices, listening to their stories. Next slide. We listened to several people. We built community discussions down in Cameron to try to understand different perspectives. Claire Marceau she's a Cameron native. She grew up with a father who was a fisherman, a grandfather who worked in industry, and now she goes back. She works with Bechtel, a construction firm who's working for one of the new liquid natural gas terminals, and she feels like she's infiltrating. She's working from the inside out, and she has a unique perspective. Dr. Eric Johnson with the LSU Ag Center, you've heard his voice. And Ray Mallett, a Cameron fisherman who is dedicated to staying, even though it's getting harder and harder to work in this industry. Next slide.
They started digging this channel wider and deeper and deeper and wider.
Yeah.
So more volume of water.
Yeah.
So the water used to come in 8 hours before it split.
Yeah.
So now we don't have a brackish lake no more, it's salt.
Yep. So the hope is with this restoration project, from the way I understand it, is that they will take advantage of rainwater, but allow a sheet flow of fresh water to come through from like northwest of the Mermentau Basin, coming through the northeast corner of Lake Calcasieu, and create water control structures that allow that fresh water to come out, right? And so that's kind of the hope, is to try to freshen Lake Calcasieu.
Because they know it's how much salt's in there.
Well, exactly. They know this isn't, it's only going to get worse.
See, that's why we're seeing a decline, because we don't have a hatchery no more. I mean, how's things going to survive, you know?
The same thing that's impacting the birds, the sea level rise, the storm surge that's taking over the marsh is impacting the shrimpers, right? The salinity levels in Lake Calcasieu are changing. There's not enough fresh water, and they're not able to shrimp. Now, is all of that sea level rise, or is there some other culprits? And we'll talk about that in a minute. Next slide.
There's opportunity to make tremendous strides, I think, in the coastal land. There's opportunity to make tremendous strides, I think, in the coastal land law space, in where issues about sea level rise and environment are inextricably connected at this point with energy production in our world. You know, the demand for energy is not reducing, or maybe never go away. Encouraging people who care about the environment to interject and maybe even infiltrate, some might say, entities that are working that way in the world, so that we can do our part to make a difference.
Claire's position is complicated, and some of us may have a really hard time accepting where she stands. But she, working inside industry now, really sees this infiltration as a strategy of care for her community. And living in that place, that may be the only option. These industries aren't going away. And so it's really a hard balance. And it was an appreciation to have her in the room, to have the conversation with the fishermen who she continues to support, and to have them all see that there might be a way forward together. Next slide.
There's opportunity to make tremendous strides.
Next slide. Yeah. There were other people that we talked to, some of whom we will hear from today. James Hyatt for a Better Bayou, who's advocating on behalf of building community despite the demands around him from industry and the environment. John Allaire, a Cameron resident who's also a retired environmental engineer, who has a lot to say about the industry coming in, moving right next door to him. Alyssa Portaro, working with Habitat Recovery, who's working to restore places that extractive industries are trying to take over. Next slide.
You've got FERC, you got DOE, you've got Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, you got the Coastal Management Group from Louisiana Department of Natural Resources. And those are the folks that have primacy over the issues. Those are the permitting agencies. You read these big, huge articles they have on, we got to protect these cheniers. They're more special than wetlands. We have black rails out here, threatened endangered species. They first found them in Louisiana. Almost the first ones they ever found were on this property. Audubon has projects and grants. They were out here last week and surveying for the black rails. I have a PhD student, been out here for 2 years studying black rails. People are in here all the time because these cheniers are supposed to be protected. They just rubber stamp these permits for them, you know, and say the regulations say we're not supposed to do it, but a few jobs for a while.
Next slide. The marsh is under threat, as Erica said, as John Allaire just said. Cameron Parish is facing more than just sea level rise, climate change, storm surge, hurricanes. The new liquid natural gas expansion is what John is talking about. Even just next to his property, Commonwealth LNG had permits to move in, and they were paused for a while, and then the judge overturned the decision, and now they have bought out his property and he's had to move. This black rail habitat that is on his property is now fully under threat. And with that LNG expansion, that brings shoreline erosion from ship traffic, the saltwater intrusion, the construction economy there has blown up. There are camps with RVs and people who live there that are not really from there and don't want to stay. They're just there for a while, like John has said. And the loss of dark sky is incredible. The place doesn't look like it used to. And the fishermen are really feeling this impact, feeling the sound under the water, the sound impacts. They're starting to measure this, that's an actual impact on the sea life. And that the loss of dark sky has just changed the whole ecosystem, the whole environment that they're used to, and the place that they call home. Next slide.
Everything is centered around this whole LNG expansion now, and it's just going to be temporary. And like, it's so clear that people don't want to move there. They're just bringing their RVs to, work temporarily. They're not from there, and so you're not really building a community. You're just sort of importing a lot of people that aren't from there, or share the values or whatever, right? Like, understand what's been the beauty of the place, and it's just turning into a glowing night sky of industry. There's no like dark sky. There's not going to be any dark sky left in Cameron.
Next slide. Now, there are small wins and there are new projects to build high marsh, which has never been done intentionally before. There are innovations in prescribed fire and continued use of community knowledge as ecological data. And these are the ways we can listen for how to repair this community. Eventually, these facilities, they will run out of a need for this gas, and we will have to build back. Next slide. So this year, in a recent conversation I had with Dr. Johnson, they received 4 more years of field survey funding. This is pretty incredible. And they're going to be able to collect more data with a master's student actually going out and preparing land and trying to discover what is the way to build this high marsh. Never been done, only accidentally has it been done. And Rockefeller, which is a wildlife refuge, this is public land. There's very little black rail habitat on public land and very little high marsh on public land. And so this is an opportunity to build out this habitat on public land intentionally and over time. And so this is very exciting. Again, it's a small win, but it's a win. Next slide. Also, Dr. Johnson and his crew, they just released a prescribed fire manual for land managers, focusing on the management using fire, which is something that used to happen naturally and used to really restore the prairie, the marsh, and build back those areas so that they could sustain even with the surge from the water. And so this is an exciting development. People have been concerned about the use of fire, and so this is a new practice. They're teaching people about how to use fire, where to use fire. It really needs to be done properly with a slow burn that is managed very carefully so that you don't burn out the black rails as they are nesting. And so there's a lot of careful tactics that need to be taken into account. But it's a very dense manual that I've read, but it's very exciting. And Dr. Johnson gave a talk and brought people out in the marsh to kind of walk through how it would be done recently, and I got to attend that session. So some very good practices that are being instituted. Next slide. And then the community knowledge. Again, I mentioned earlier a woman named Alyssa Portaro. She is working with the fishermen. She is working with the community down in Cameron to build out community knowledge of the people who persist there, the people who stay. And there are people who stay despite all of this influx of construction and industry. And the fishermen, they are catching in their nets. They, as she says, they have told me where the smell, the mud has changed the most, where oyster reefs used to be, where they're not now. And they're experts on this ecosystem. And so really trying to connect the fishermen with other places, sources of knowledge, connect them with the coastal resource management folks, connect them with Audubon, connect them with the other, experts in the field and treat them like experts. And so have those relationships with the community and other residents in the community who have just been there forever and know the land, know the water, and treat them as sources of knowledge. And so it's wonderful that there are people on the ground there that are tapping into that, who are getting those stories, gathering those stories, and putting them in the right hands so that doesn't get lost. Next slide. So back to the ghost bird. Next slide. The ghost bird, the black rail, is sending us a signal. The landscape is changing faster than the species. And what is lost in the marsh is also lost in the community. This is so important to realize. Disappearance is not inevitable, but the question is whether we are willing to listen. Thank you. And I pass it on to Codi.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and Jessica as well. So hi, everyone. My name is Codi Sharkey, and I am the Conservation Programs Manager here at the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium in Dubuque, Iowa. Now, we've heard from Jessica and Victoria about a lot of what wetlands do for species, right? The black rail and frogs and toads that call our wetlands home. Go ahead to the next slide, please. My first introduction of wetlands was actually through trout fishing. I grew up spending the summers with my grandparents trout fishing and foraging in the driftless region. And my grandma and grandpa always would say, like, oh, the water's changed. These trout holes aren't as good as they used to be. There's a lot more algae. There's a lot more runoff. And it made me kind of upset, like, man, why don't I get these cool trout holes to fish at? Hearing all these great stories growing up. And you can see in that one picture, my grandpa's kind of salty that I got the first catch of the day. And he's used to being the first one to catch. But it got me to thinking, why are these precious gems in the driftless area why are they degrading? Why are they losing that lust that they have, that mystic that they have in them? And that led me to wetlands. And what wetlands are and what they do, not only for these species that we love, like frogs and toads and black rails and trout in my instance, but many other species. So what are wetlands? And we've kind of covered this a little bit, but to dive just a little bit deep into it, this is water that's covering soil all or part of the year. A wetland may only be present for a couple of months out of the year, or they're year round. There is many varieties of wetlands. You have those marshes, you have those swamps, peat bogs, wet meadows. All of those constitute as a wetland. And their unique position provides a great benefit, not only from the wildlife we've heard about, but also for us humans. And I think sometimes we tend to forget that we are animals too. We are part of the animal kingdom, right? We're the human species of that. And we need these wetlands just as much as any toad or any bird like the black rail in order to help our species continue forward. Now, my college education was not necessarily in this type of field. I wanted to go on to the medical route before I was infected, if you will, with the joys of working in nature every day. So I know a lot about kidneys, and I know how they work, and I know what they do for our own bodies. And I really was able to apply that to the wetlands in our watershed. So we here at the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium have a very unique position to talk about the greater Mississippi River watershed and all that entails. People don't realize that, yeah, they may be out in Nebraska, but their waterways get to the Mississippi and they go through many different wetlands and tributaries just to get there. And all of that goes with it. So these wetlands really act as these kidneys and filtering out all of that pollutants that come with it. Next slide, please. So when we think of wetlands and ecological services and ecological benefits, a lot of times we want to think that, yeah, they help all of these species that we love and care about, but we always seem to link that what they do for us to the very end. And so when I'm talking to people and guests about wetlands, we have in a unique position here at the museum and aquarium to not only tell them about the species that live in these wetlands, but also what they're doing for us as a human species. And we are a museum. And I firmly believe that as a museum, we, yes, are telling history past, but we are telling history now too. And there's a lot of history in the making right now with wetlands. We had Sackett versus the EPA a couple years ago. Now we had changes to the definition of the waters of the United States, all affecting our wetlands and not in a good way. So here at the museum and aquarium, we take on this ability to educate our guests and hopefully create accidental advocates that when they see any kind of policy or things happening in their community that will affect a wetland, they're able to step up and say, hey, yeah, there's great wildlife that these are benefiting, but our community really needs these wetlands. One, nature's flood insurance, right? Here in Dubuque, we have a great opportunity for people to come and see how nature infrastructure, especially around wetlands, can really help in our communities and help with flood resiliency, drought resiliency, and even climate. So we have the Bee Branch, and this is a really unique area in town because I grew up a block from where this picture was taken. And this picture used to hold a house. I remember driving past this house, and every time it flooded, people would have their stuff outside. And I couldn't imagine what the inside of these houses that were constantly flooded looked like. It's not only an issue for the structure of the home, but it's a health issue, right? Mold, all of that things that can be spurred from flooding. So the city took action, and this talk about tongue twister. Bee Branch corridor was made to protect over 1,000 homes and businesses from this chronic flash flooding that Dubuque experiences. So we actually took a daylighted sewer stream and created a creek and a floodplain, and also incorporated these really cool biohaven floating wetlands that are made from BPA-free plastic, recycled plastic bottles for like the flotation device, and then native wetlands on top to help, again, with the kidney and help filter this water that is coming through. Not only that, but it has a bunch of scenic and recreational spaces where you can stop and just enjoy nature, the nature that we find in wetlands. Next slide, please. So here is a kind of before and after of what this is doing. So this is our downtown area in Dubuque. That was any kind of heavy rain event, we would see flash flooding. And these always are happening in certain areas of town, areas that may be low income, areas that have very old homes, very outdated infrastructure. And so we needed as a city and community to come together and figure out a way how we could do this that not only is going to not take forever to do, but also not take forever and $1 billion to complete, right? And then you can see after I am reading a book at the wetland, just short space from where that before picture was taken. Now it is providing booming habitat for wildlife, but it's also protecting some of our most vulnerable places in town from that flash flooding that happens continuously. So that's just one ecological service that these wetlands are doing for us. You know, we plant them and we fail to remember that place that may not look very good all year round is actually doing something for my home and my health and down the road for our families. Next slide. Another thing that we forget that wetlands do is help with our climate and help regulate that uncontrolled climate change that we are experiencing. And this was something that I didn't realize until I had the privilege of going out to the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center of CERC in Maryland and seeing the work that they are doing, specifically researching the carbon capture of wetlands and marshes. And that is really interesting to see that research happen in place. That picture on the left shows a marsh in the Chesapeake Bay, and all of those little tubes are going down. And you can see on the right what those tubes kind of look like. But they're recording the amount of carbon that is being captured in that soil there. And that gives us a good insight of what these declining areas are doing in our fight against climate change. Next slide, please. So, and I'm a prairie girl, far and wide. I love spending a time on the prairie, but I'm also a soggy bottom nerd. And I can tell you when it comes to carbon capture, these soggy bottoms, they capture a ton more carbon than a regular prairie. And that is because all of that soil right? Jessica mentioned it's muddy areas. The title of my slideshow is More Than Mud, because a lot of times we see these areas, people see these areas as muddy places for mosquitoes to breed and just kind of a nuisance. And as a soggy bottom girl, knowing the ins and outs, I kind of say, how rude. Let me tell you something and kind of get into that what they're doing for us. Like, and people will tell you, Robin Wall Kimmerer of the author will tell you, even if you remove something as small as a mosquito, it makes that ripple effect, that larger spot. So even that muddy bottom, that soggy bottom that doesn't have water in it, it's still providing a life source for something. It's still providing a service for us by capturing all that carbon in. So when we think about how we can fight against climate change, yeah, we can recycle, we can shut off light switches and turn off the faucet till we're blue in the face while we brush our teeth. But sometimes we just need to look outside and look at these green spaces and the existing infrastructure that we have and take a new look on it and see, let's help this wildlife while also helping ourselves as an animal species as well. Next slide, please. But it's not only the flood resiliency and the carbon capture that these wetlands are doing, but they're doing so much more in terms of when it comes to our drinking water. So I found very interesting surveys in my years of being a wetland nerd on why and how I can talk to people and get them excited about wanting to advocate for wetlands. And a lot of times, the further you are away from a major water source, the more better outlook you have on water quality. And maybe that's because you're not seeing it right up close there and personal all the time. Here at the bottom, Iowa State University did a survey amongst college students on how college students view their drinking water. And you'll see 82% at Iowa State University, they view that drinking water as safe. And they're the farthest away. And even though they're at the headwaters, it's not visible from their campus, right? Then you got UNI, a little 72, but then the University of Iowa, right there on the Iowa River, 63% are least likely to say their drinking water is safe, and they're seeing it every day. Same at the University of Missouri when they ask people, do you know you live in the Mississippi watershed? A lot of you see that green, less than 40% of people in those states realize they're part of that watershed. And so that makes me think if these people don't realize that they're in this watershed, they probably don't realize so many people source their drinking water from the Mississippi. 20 million people source their drinking water from the Mississippi, in fact. And that is why when we think of how can we help not only ourselves and our drinking water? I know in the state of Iowa, with the increase of cancer rates and the numerous beaches being closed down, we're starting to really question our water quality and how we can make that better for ourselves. But then also remembering people down south, do they have the infrastructure to clean their drinking water? Are we overloading it with what we're doing in the agricultural Midwest? So it's an easy way to kind of pull these things in together, that these areas that we're so quick to want to get rid of because we see them as just wasted space, they're actually doing so much for us as humans, and we just don't even see it. And then we have these awesome species like the toads and the frogs and the black rails. And I will argue one of the coolest ones in there is going to be a freshwater mussel, a rock looking booger filled rock looking thing, right? Another bioindicator that are super important to our waterways. And so here at the River Museum, we have a unique position to tell that story, right? I always start off of telling, I grew up trout fishing. I wanted to know what was affecting these waters. I want these pristine holes that I grew up hearing stories about. And that led me into this conservation work. And a lot of people, once they've realized, like, oh my gosh, this is affecting me, clean water, they're going to tie a memory to it of, oh, I grew up maybe swimming in a beach that's constantly closed down to water quality issues, or they're getting notifications on their phone that they may have a boil advisory or a fish kill, something like that. So we have these ecological services that are happening for us humans, and that's what we want to amplify. Next slide, please. And like I've mentioned throughout this entire talk, we have a unique position here at the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium because we are a museum and telling the history as it is in the past and what's happening now. But we also have these aquariums that can highlight these animals that we are trying to protect and that live in these spaces that we're trying to protect. So in Dubuque and in the Northeast Iowa, we've had some great headway on restoration projects. So I mentioned the Bee Branch Creek and the Bee Branch Greenway. That runs from 16th, the 32nd Street detainment basins where those pictures before were taken, all the way down to 16th Street where it drains into the Mississippi. And this is a great area that not only allows for people to enjoy recreation, riding their bikes, but it also allows us to get up and close and personal with a wetland species. So whether that be a duck, a mallard. This picture up there on the far left, that day I gave a girl binoculars who's seen a mallard through a binoculars the first time and was blown away at the color of their feet. She could not believe how orange they were and seeing them. So it gives us that ability to get into these spaces without going way out into an actual wetland and get soggy bottoms, but to get up close and personal with them in an area that is still comfortable. Then we have the Lock 10 pool habitat restoration that is happening with the Upper Mississippi River restoration project. And really, this is taking the effects of the lock and dam system and seeing how they've degraded a lot of our wetlands and riverbeds and restoring those, because they realize the habitat that was found in them is very pertinent to the economy of our river. And we need those spaces, not only for the fishermen, but the other people who rely on it as well. And then there's so much that we're doing here at the River Museum, and I'm so excited to talk about this. This is kind of a side quest that became a big project here at the River Museum, is because we had this woodward wetland and that had really kind of been neglected. And that may have been there wasn't too many people who knew how to approach a big piece of land, and it was supposed to function at a wetland. And I'm like, I got an idea. Let's do this. We have a great opportunity to tell a wetland story to the hundreds of guests that we see through our doors every year. And they always leave with something. So we first started off with kind of taking inventory of our wetland and seeing what invasives, what natives were there, what's living in our creek or in that wetland pond, what species are around. So we started off with doing that, and then we wanted to know what is our goal. And it easily became apparent that our goal with this wetland was to tell that wetland story and be that voice for the wetland, and not only for the wetland in terms of the habitat that it's creating for the species that we're trying to protect, but also for us, and also what people can do and advocate for these wetland areas. Malia is a newly elected or a newly hired conservation department employee who will be starting soon. She did 2 summers of Teens Take Care and then 2 summers of interning with me in the conservation department. And one of her projects that was 2 years in the making was making those biohaven wetland floating islands for our floating island as well, with upcycled material. So we were able to work with our grill and get some upcycled jugs as like that floating base. We worked with wetland specialists to find out what kind of species would be good. And she was able to create these floating islands, not only to help the reptilians and amphibians that live on this wetland species, but also to be that visual of this is innovative infrastructure that we can do that is helping our water, not only for those that live in it, but us, because eventually someone's going to drink this water that is coming through. And we remind people, water is an infinite resource or a finite resource. It just changes forms, right? It's either gas, liquid, or solid. So this liquid fresh water that we have to protect it, right? And so that's what we're here doing at the River Museum. And I encourage you all, if you're ever in Dubuque, Iowa, to swing by and see how this wetland restoration is going. We had goats here just a couple weeks ago for Party for the Planet to help eat down all of those invasive species so we can get out there with real wetland species to help those grow. We're working on grants to kind of get better signage to tell that story of, yes, this is habitat for wildlife, but in terms of what it's doing for humans, we got flood protection, we have climate resiliency, we have a Brita, a nature filter right here on our campus in a large scale. And we're getting to do all these cool things. And we hope that seeing that and knowing that information is a catalyst to where they can then be advocates for our wetlands and be those voices of the wetlands. So thank you all for taking your time to be out here with us today. I enjoyed nerding out with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. You all are such excellent presenters. I put it in the chat. I know some folks may need to hop, including presenters. So please take care of yourself. And thank you for being here. Gretchen, I'm going to pass it to you to do a quick thank you. And then we'll just see if there's any last minute things that the presenters would like to say, I do think I have to say something, which is just like gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. And also, you all laid out some really serious threats, impacts, and stories. And you gave me a lot of hope because you talked about like the power of listening and learning to understand, like that those listenings and understandings is informing, is education, is going to action. And so I'm glad we can hold that and that, that practice together and that we're in this together. So Gretchen, with that, I'm gonna pass it to you.
Thanks, Marie. Just a really quick shout out to our sponsors and our funders. This events like these would not be possible without the support of our sponsors and funders. So Walton Family Foundation, Audubon, Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's Outdoor Fund, the Ingram Distillery, Minnesota Paddling Opener, and our special webinar sponsor, National Wildlife Federation. So thank you to those sponsors. And we also count on individual donors like you. So if many of you already donated, so we appreciate that. If you haven't, there's a link in the chat. There's a QR code. Your support truly makes a difference. And just showing up and being here today is very important to us. So thank you for being here. And I'll send it back to you, Marie, to wrap up.
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to give the opportunity, one ways that we can support the wonderful presenters here is going to their websites, donating, following. So if there's anything last that you wanted to say to the webinar as your last words, and if there are places where you'd really want to push folks to support your work, thank you so much for sharing your time, expertise, your joy. There was a lot of joy in these slides with us today. Love it. See some links coming in. Thank you so much. I think we answered the one question too, Cody. Thanks for grabbing that out of chat.
Wonderful. And we will share with folks, as Marie mentioned, just to remind folks, we have been recording. We will transcribe or process the recording, excuse me, and then email it back out to you. So if you're like me and you're like, whoa, what was that part Jessica said? Or that one story, Victoria, and then Cody had this piece. This is going to be in your inbox for you to watch over and over and over again and share it with your colleagues and others. So thank you.
Yes. And yes, Susan, there will be a follow-up email with these resources. We'll share out the links to how to follow Jessica, Cody, and Victoria. Yes, absolutely. All right, y'all.